Alhamdulillah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody's Ramadan is going well so far. Alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody's the dark character, mashallah. Can you just turn down the echo, brother, please?
Sorry.
So, guys, we've got a very interesting show, and to be honest, it is quite spine tingling, hair raising show today. And I've been on this journey with Brother Mustafa for probably a year and a half when he mentioned these type of narratives to me, and I really never used to pay much notice to these kind of situations and dramas and how things will play out and how governments and politicians will all of a sudden seem to just drop away, and how they uh, kind of like are even popped up to make them seem that they are the best since sliced bread. But then after a short while, you see these particular individuals just drop away to some scandal or whatever. And Brother Mustafa has really pointed out to me indicators how certain governments, especially here in the UK, have been planning out, and how they pick out certain politicians for best serve their basically to best serve their commands, and how to implement rules and regulations upon the masses and how to control the masses. Uh, as you can see, we've got a very shady figure on the screen here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Brother Mustafa. How are you doing, Habibi?
Wa alaikum salam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah, great. Jazakallah khair, Brother Muhammad, for introducing this new show, which I really do hope people will benefit from in regards to this discussion, which is essentially on who are the puppet masters, and the thumbnail, which Brother Muhammad has brilliantly portrayed on the show's caption, will give you an indication as to the topic we're going to discuss today and the extreme relevance for each and every one of us as to who controls our societies, why are they controlled, and we're coming out naming people as well. This is the big thing. It's a bit of a risk, hence by sheer chance, I've got my attire as such, which is not being pre-planned, but for some reason it's only midday here in the UK, but the light doesn't seem to be coming through. Maybe that's a good sign for me. But what we're observing today is going to be a great show. I want it to be interactive. We want to have a discussions with the audience as well, if people really come up. And I want to give you a flavor of who runs the government, who they represent, you see. Governments are traditionally seen, or spokesmen like prime ministers, home secretaries, foreign secretaries. If we're to think these individuals actually make decisions among by themselves, sitting in the cabinet of 12 ministers and decide things. No, that's not the case. They're given advice, and they are mouthpieces and tool pieces, like spokesmen. So even these prime ministers and secretaries and ministers, they are spokesmen for people behind them who set the policies, who advise them what should be said, what should not be said. How long a prime minister serves, these people behind the scenes, they decide. And one such individual who has been capturing the headlines lately, as people may be aware, is Michael Gove, an individual who I've been speaking for a very, very long time. I have been attending these marches in central London and been highlighting the people such as Suella Braverman, the ex-Home Secretary, and Michael Gove, the people who call the peaceful protesters rather, who go to the pro-Palestinian marches, where hundreds of thousands of people attend. Very, very few people there, if any, I've seen myself, and I've been going to every march nearly. I've created any trouble. It's been totally peaceful, yet the government is trying to stigmatize these protesters as being extremists or radicals or mobs. And we're talking about people of a different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different cultures, all coming for the purpose of condemning the brutality that is taking place in Palestine. But the disastrous thing here is our government support for this. Now, why are they supporting, in fact, genocide, when they're the quickest to preach to everybody else around the world about human rights, human dignity? But when it comes to issues pertaining to Israel, then they just simply turn the blind eye. What is this all about? So we'll be discussing this matter as well. Very recently, people would be aware Michael Gove has come out with a statement in Parliament last week in which he's going to redefine what is in essence deemed as unacceptable speech or extremist tendencies from amongst what he's termed the Islamists, which is in quotation marks, and the far right in particular. So the whole objective of this show is to discuss these matters and for you to really understand the public. Who are these people? Michael Gove, who is, as I made mention previously, he served initially in the 2005 David Cameron government, where he was an education minister. This was the individual, for everybody's attention, who was the proponent and the catalyst for LGBTQ within schools. The very individual who was the catalyst and the proponent of same-sex education in school for young children at primary school level, and the method in which they would learn that would also be very graphic. He is, like I said, was a secretary at the time. He was given that position by the then Prime Minister David Cameron. To 18 years or 19 years later, the full cycle has turned, and Michael Gove has made David Cameron very recently, due to the cabinet reshuffle, he made him the foreign secretary. So Lord Cameron, as he's commonly referred to, is now the foreign secretary due to the cabinet reshuffle, where Suella Braverman, the ex-home secretary, the very woman who accused the mob, she said, the mob in her term, people protesting because we were calling her out. She was calling those peaceful protesters who are watching the atrocities taking place in Palestine, she was referring to them as mobs, as extremists, as Islamists, as if some Muslims were in these audiences, or rather in these crowds, demanding people accept Islam. I was a person going there giving Islamic literature out. Lots of people were taking the leaflets and reading up about Islam. So I'm assuming she's talking about myself, because news would have come forward that there are people speaking against you. Now, it's very interesting that when she makes all these remarks, on the Saturday before she got sacked from her position as Home Secretary, there is a YouTube clip which is available in which Michael Gove, the Levelling Up Secretary, who I've already made mention of, this very esoteric, shadowy figure who decides and pulls all the strings in the government. I would call him like a representative of the satanic system behind the scene, who really delves in and decides all matters. Here we are. This is a picture of him. In my view, and this is a big statement, but I can corroborate it very much, he's the most influential British politician, certainly this century. I would say even further, which is be a big statement, the most influential the most influential Western politician since the end of the Second World War. But for the sake of clarity, as we're in this century, let's say for this century, this man decides everything. How long a prime minister will serve, what the policies of that prime minister will be, everything decided, this particular individual decides. He's the one who's come forward to redefine what is deemed as extremism. And his own lawyers, his own representatives have said, you don't have a case. People have been criticizing him for trying to encroach on freedom of speech. He's been labeling Muslim organizations, which are renowned as being very fair-minded and very liberal, organizations such as called Muslim Council of Britain, which has also been deemed to have been along this extremist tendency. So we're going to play a few clips for you just to substantiate what I'm speaking about. We must note that Michael Gove was the individual who made Rishi Sunak the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. We all must know that Rishi Sunak was not the elected Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. In the last general election, Liz Truss was the Conservative Party candidate, and she was the victor in the election. Before the election took place, she had a one-off with Rishi Sunak to decide who would become the Conservative Party leader, and she won hands down. She then took up the post of Prime Minister and shockingly served only 7 weeks of her role, the shortest ever role in the history of British politics for the role of Prime Minister. Why did she serve that? It's because Michael Gove in the background knew full well that the Conservative Party members would never vote for a little Asian man above ethnically one of their own, if you want to call it, even if she's a female. Obviously, she's an English lady. So that's exactly what happened. Rishi Sunak lost hands down. But because Michael Gove played a critical role in this, he decided that the economic woes that Britain found itself in was as a result of Liz Truss's tenure as a chancellor in the previous administration of the British government, under the prime ministership of Boris Johnson. So she was given the blame for that and sacked within 7 weeks. This is just outstanding, or unheralded. So why did they put Rishi Sunak into power? Why did Michael Gove put Rishi Sunak in power? The indigenous masses would never have voted for him, simply because he's a little Indian guy. The average quintessential Englishman would have preferred to have voted for one of their own, even if that meant voting for the opposite party, Labour Party candidate. So after they won the election, they replaced Liz Truss. Rishi Sunak becomes prime minister. Why and how does he become prime minister? There are reasons behind that, which I will substantiate. It's very, very important to understand the point. But who were the ones behind the scenes deciding, let's get rid of Liz Truss and put Rishi Sunak in? It's this chap, Michael Gove, the levelling up minister, sometimes known as the intergovernmental minister as well, who decides policies. It's only a select few who decide these policies. Now, we're going to show you some evidence from a BBC interview in which one famous lady makes point of this. Who are the decision makers? Who decides things? This picture, obviously, is of the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. And as I said, I will make mention as to the reason as to why Michael Gove got him into the position of Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. What we'll do now, however, before I do go into these matters, and they're quite elongated, is for people to watch the clip which Brother Muhammad is about to play, inshallah, on an interview on the BBC, in which a lady who is eminent speaks of, it's not just me saying it, some Muslim who takes exception to the statements, recent statements of Michael Gove. But as I've been speaking to Brother Muhammad about this individual for a very long period of time, as he's confirmed, he was not so much attentive to it, but now it's all coming out in the open. Who is this particular individual? And here we have, the clip is about to be played. It's only for 1 minute. Please pay lots of attention to what is being said in this interview. When you're ready, Brother Muhammad.
What do they need to know that you have found out?
Everything is decided by a quite small group of men who decide who will be an MP, who will be a minister, when that minister's career will crash by pulling various levers, who will be Prime Minister and how long they will remain Prime Minister. And of course, Conservative Party voters and people who go to the ballot box think their vote matters. It doesn't matter at all because this stuff is all pre-decided. Some of them are names, Michael Gove, Dominic Cummings. As I've said, Cummings is Gove and Gove is Cummings. They've worked together side by side for well over 20 years. Dougie Smith is, you will only find one photograph on the internet of Dougie Smith. He is right now at Rishi's right-hand side as his main advisor. This is a man who used to run the Fever Sex parties, who has quite a notorious, well-known background. But you won't hear anybody talk about Dougie Smith. When I ask people about Dougie Smith, they would say to me, I don't want to talk about him, and put their hand over my phone.
Interview of an eminent female personality here in the United Kingdom who has got close contacts with the government. And here you have it. The repetition of this particular individual has come out, Michael Gove, and his select entourage of people who decide, as she has said, governmental policies. How long the Prime Minister will serve. What is the reason behind his policies? Now, you've heard it first from me. You will see a growing now tendency now to do away now with Rishi Sunak, because he served his purpose for being Prime Minister for a period of time. Britain has benefited with trade deals with India as a result of his ethnic background being Indian. So they've served a tremendous purpose.
Can I add something, guys? I really want you to do an experiment when you have when you have time. Google this particular individual called Dougie Smith, and you were probably able to count on one hand of how many images there are of this particular individual. I really want you to, when you have time, to type in Dougie Smith, and you'll be surprised, very surprised. I just did it right now as Brother Mustafa was talking, and there are not many pictures of this mysterious individual. Sorry, Brother Mustafa, carry on.
No, thank you for that. It's very important that Brother Muhammad did make mention of that. I mean, when I did a search for him on the internet, as you made mention, there are hardly any images of him at all. And he's a very, very senior person within the governmental roles. But they are very shadowy people. Now, behind the scenes, you see, what are they all about? As I said to you, Michael Gove was the education secretary when they introduced same-sex education for young children. The catalyst was done by Mr. Gove in 2005. This is a picture of Dougie Smith. So these are the individuals who run the scenes behind everything. They're the ones who decide everything. Now, who are these people and what do they represent? Why are these the very same people who are perpetuators of things which are against our creator, for example? We see governmental policies here becoming rampant, as I may mention repetitively now. Young children at primary school are being compelled to learn about same-sex education, the intricate details of what that involves as well. And these were the people, the catalysts. Mr. Gove was the catalyst in 2005 when he became the education secretary. How did he decide? Who decides, no, we're going to implement such policies within within our school system, for example? What are we going to do in terms of pushing aside anyone who goes against us? And this is how they go about it. Now, in terms of Rishi Sunak, particularly, people need to be aware that the reason why he became prime minister was because in Britain, who had exited through the Brexit, Europe, they needed their own personal trade. So by going singularly by themselves, they hope to have gained lots of trading contacts. And with India in particular, who Mr. Sunak is ethnically Indian, this was a great opportunity for them to have huge trade deals, which they've currently signed with the Indian government, much to the benefit of them. So they've been using him for a purpose. But also, if you look at it in a religious aspect, there's a very, very interesting parallels taking place. Now, Michael Gove is an openly declared Zionist. He was adopted as a child at a very, very young age. And because in lots of circumstances, people who have led untraditional lives, shall we call it, people who've not led the quintessential life where you've grown up with parents, with siblings, and had a happy life, you've attended school, gone on holidays, and then you've grown up, gone to work or university, or whatever the case may be. This is what would be deemed as the normality of life. But those who have not had this normal life, people who have been adopted at a young age, or have not had siblings, or who have not had, parents to look after them, who have been put into the social care system, for example, these people then, when they become adults and they then come to a certain stage in their life where they become resentful towards God, they blame God for the unfortunate events that take place in their lives. And hence, they become representatives of Satan. So this may sound, people might be thinking, well, how does this connect the dots all together? The dots are connected because they're trying to introduce a system contrary to the system that God has pertained to. So where in the Islamic narrative, there is a total rejection of things such as LGBTQ. Not that by definition, the Islamic narrative is clear. If you are compelled towards a person of the same sex disposition, the compulsion you have or the attraction you have is not equated to be something which is of sin. Rather, you must not enact the physicality of doing such an act by having, like relationships where you have, in the UK here currently, everything seems to have gone haywire. In churches, same-sex couples can get married. The complete antithesis of what the Christians believe. That's very firmly in the Old Testament. We read that. Let man not lie with another man. I'm just paraphrasing. We see the Islamic narrative is as such. So these are the very proponents. The anti-God system is propelling this for the singular purpose of making people go against what God has revealed. Another thing to bear in mind is to do with the feminine here in the UK. Women have become totally dominant in matrimonial affairs to the extent that if a separation takes place between two spouses, and just say they have 3 children aged just say 13, 11, and 9 as an example, in the event of a divorce taking place, the courts automatically give the children to the mother, even if they share co-responsibility, both do working equal hours. The fact still remains that the mother gets the children. So in divorces, often one party becomes resentful to the other party. And in the case here, women then do not allow the children to see their fathers. The fathers lose everything. They lose the estate. They lose the entire assets that they had together. And hence they become slow and redundant. This is why we have organizations such as Families Needs Fathers, Fathers for Justice. People are not getting the justice. The men are not getting the justice into societies. It works from the top. There was a period of time not long ago that when the Home Secretary of the UK was a lady called Priti Patel, a staunch feminist. She would supersede or supervise the Metropolitan Police, whose head was a feminist lesbian by the name of Cressida Dick, who then in turn would propel to the Met Police policies on the quiet in regards to domestic incidents. She would put female adherents within the police who would by proxy blame men for every incident, even if a man claims to be a victim in a domestic abuse case, for example. If the police come out, they'll separate the two. They'll separate the man and the woman. The man will make his allegation, even though he's the one, for example, who may have called the police. And what will happen in turn? They will blame the man rather than the woman who is the perpetuator. Then what happens? You go to the social workers. If children are involved in particular, social workers come knocking on your door saying, oh, because there have been some issues in regards to matrimonial spouses, that's the children now need to be observed by the social services. So men very often, they don't report incidents of domestic abuse against them because they know the system is paralleled against them. And then the social workers, particularly female social workers who come into the field of social work, they are very much doing this for the singular purpose of crushing men, you see. So these are such policies which are contrary to God's law. In the Bible, it states the head of woman is man. The head of man is Christ. The head of Christ is God. The Quran says something similar. Devote the wives, spouse or females are devoted to Allah and by proxy to their husbands. So and they must obey the husband. This is a continuous Islamic narrative, which is there in the Bible as well. So they want to turn that upside down. So who are the propellants of this? How has this system come into place where women have become dominant? LGBT has become dominant. Atheism has become dominant, all to the rejection of God. They've already usurped the church. Now they're going after Islam. And hence people such as Michael Gove, who you've just heard, coming out with these new undefined statements as to what is deemed as extreme tendency. He's also bracketed Islam with the far right. Now, the far right and Islam would seem to be two extremes of one thing, which is what they want us to believe. But however, the far right and Islam have much in common. We hold on, people of a far right disposition, their only issues are that they believe that we're superior to other people due to our ethnicity, for example, white Caucasian. But in terms of the actual day-to-day living affairs, Islam and the far right have much in common. We believe in the good moral structure of a society where the father is the head of the family as pertaining to the history of how every civilization has lived. We also believe in the common shared values of rejection of things such as LGBTQ, respect for the elderly, a total way of living that has been accumulated within the Islamic narrative and also within people of a far right disposition. As I made mention, their only issue is that they feel that they are somewhat superior due to their ethnic backgrounds. So in terms of Michael Gove in particular, who I really want to focus on, we've seen this video caption. Now, I want to also play another video in regards to a interview that an eminent Muslim speaker by the name of Abdullah Andalusi actually had with Nigel Farage, the previous UKIP, that's the United Kingdom Independent Party leader, who interviewed Abdullah Andalusi. This is very much well worth watching because Nigel Farage has been commonly derailed and castigated by the media for his far right tendencies, being the head of the UK Independent Party. But I think more and more people who watch his conversations, it becomes clear that, in fact, Islam purports to many of the traditional British values, which are now being eroded away by these esoteric figures. So we're going to play a little clip here from the interview. It's a little bit lengthy, so please pay attention, because the whole objective of these shows is that we pay attention to what is being said. And obviously, we are to encourage people to share this link to their contacts so they can view this. So here is a little clip we're going to play, and please, people, pay attention as the discussion taking place. Brother Muhammad, go ahead. Can't hear anything. There's no voice. There's no voice coming through, brother. No voice is coming through.
Let me try that again.
There's no voice coming through, brother. No voice is coming through.
Let me try that again, brother. 1 second. Can you hear me okay, though?
I can hear you now, yes, but you were unable to play the... we couldn't hear Nigel Farage speaking.
That's strange. It worked fine before, didn't it? Okay, let me share the screen. Okay. It didn't work?
No.
That is strange. We tried it before and it worked fine, and now it's not working. We'll try it again, guys. I do apologize for this. And share screen. Okay, let me try that again. Let me know if you can hear it. Put a thumbs up, guys.
The proposed definition will hold that extremism is the promotion or advancement of an ideology based on...
Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to go back now and play it from the start, if that's okay. I don't want anybody to miss anything. Sorry, brother. Sorry, I do apologize for that, audience. So I'm going to play it again now. Start from the beginning.
Good evening. Well, Michael gave today laying out a new definition of what is extremism. Let's hear what he had to say in the House of Commons earlier on today.
The proposed definition will hold that extremism is the promotion or advancement of an ideology based on violence, hatred or intolerance that aims to negate or destroy the fundamental rights and freedoms of others, or undermine, overturn or replace the UK system of liberal parliamentary democracy and democratic rights, or intentionally create a permissive environment for others to achieve these results.
Well, I understand, that organisations, whether they're extreme right or Islamist, that are receiving government money, shouldn't receive government money if they're spreading hate. Extremism, that's the one part, perhaps, of this new definition.
So we're going to take this slowly, because what we noticed straight away, you see, is based upon what Nigel Farage just made mention, that, as I've made mention somewhat earlier, about how they're trying to categorize the far right with the Islamists. Now, on the surface level, as I made mention, they would seem to be paradoxically at the complete opposite end to each other. But what we need to observe, you see, is that the far right, as I've just made mention in detail, have much in common with Islam, you see. Those traditional points which I made mention, they're very much with the Islamic narrative. The only criticism of the far right is because of this belief that they are better than us or better than everybody else due to their ethnicity or their ethnic line, which is obviously not the correct way to think. However, the other common values that they share, which are very similar to the Islamic narrative, is clear for all to see, as I made mention, without me having to repeat these points. So we're examining now further about Michael Gove. We've already seen that initial interview. And what Nigel Farage has made mention just there is very important, because the whole objective for me to ask Brother Muhammad to stop and pause there was for everybody to reflect what I'm saying, and then to understand his comments. So carry on with the video, brother.
That I agree with, but my concern is, could this be open to abuse? And when I think about it, you know, if you attempt to undermine, overturn, or replace the UK system of liberal parliamentary democracy, well, you could be branded an extremist. And whilst that wouldn't make you a criminal, because this will not go into law that the police are going to enforce, it would take you out of public life. Well, I was elected 25 years ago to the European Parliament on a ticket that said we should leave the European Union. My first day there, Sir Stephen Wall, he was the representative for the Foreign Office in the European Union, came to my office, sat with the three of us from UKIP that had been elected and said, "Gentlemen, what are your intentions?" It was clear he thought we were an extremist terrorist group. And that's the worry with all of this. Even if you create a permissive environment for others to achieve.
So what do we hear here when Nigel Farage attends this meeting with these other governmental ministers? They completely told him, "You are extremist terrorist organization." Now, what exactly have they said which is extremist and terrorist by nature? There's nothing. They're not advocating that their own people commit any undue deeds. They're not advocating harming or violence towards anyone, but yet they're being deemed as extremist. Now, how do you categorize extremism? It's essentially to go against what the government portrays as reasonable and policies based upon their singular understanding of what a moral structure should be. So if we, as just say, for example, as Muslims, we will never accept LGBTQ to become normalized within our environments. And hence, this is the same thing that the far right, or people of a right, should we just say, a right disposition, a conservative attitude, they will not be happy with this either. So hence, anybody who goes against their narrative is defined as an extremist. Even there, we've seen particularly that it's not to be a criminal offense. So if you have a view which is contrary to the governmental view, all you will be portioned out of public life. Now that is extremely concerning. If it is such a danger, if Islamism or people of a conservative nature are of such a threat, then they should be criminalized. But the fact is, they're not. The whole objective of this is because they realize that in essence, we can't define what extremism is. Now, as this interview continues, the government has been, or Michael Gove has been receiving much criticism from a whole spectrum of society, from even church leaders to human rights groups to the average person on the road, that this is an attempt to, in essence, shut down your fundamental internal belief systems that you live by, the moral structures that we've all lived by in history, no matter which background you've come from. So this is what they're trying to redefine and recalculate. So, for example, if I go into a march and I say that the actions that are being perpetuated by Israel and the Rishi Sunak, who was such a staunch supporter of Israel, is, for us, it's very much within the Quran. The Quran is giving us an answer in Surah 5, verse 82, where Allah says that the strongest in enmity, meaning the strongest in hatred to the believers, which are the Muslims, will you find the Jews and the pagans. Now, that's not all Jews. These are particularly Zionist Jews who we are observing, people such as Gove, who is not a Jew himself by default, although he does define himself as a Zionist. But these are the very people to whom which they are making reference to these points of redefining their base. And we notice what Nigel Farage said just a short while ago. He clearly said that Michael Gove is defining what extremism is. This is not being debated by Parliament, or this is not being put to the public's attention for to understand. It's rather him saying it. And if he says it and that close group of people he's associated with, this will then be defined in Parliament as and in law as a extremist definition, although it's not actually been defined. Even the own legal personnel, of people such as Michael Gove, they're saying that you've got nothing to stand on in terms of your definition. And indeed, the Muslim Council of Britain, who have been named as such an organization with extremist views, they have expressly said that they will take the government or take Michael Gove to court should he make this statement in a public sphere. Meaning, if he makes this statement as he has in Parliament, he will not be subject to legal prosecution or attempt to take him to court, and he's hiding behind that. But if he comes out in the public and says that, then the Muslim Council of Britain can take him to court. This is a very, very important point to notice, you see, and fundamental to this. So just to reiterate the point, it's a lot of information to take in, but we're trying to break it down for you to the best of our abilities, for you to understand who are these people, what do they represent. So carry on, brother, with the interview.
The result of undermining democracy or fundamental rights. I mean, that could mean that you perhaps couldn't debate many issues on GB News if some took those arguments and went too far with them. So my concern with all of this is that I think it has the potential to be abused by governments that want to shut down debate on issues that they don't like. I think it is. We were told the new definition would be less woolly, and yet, from what I...
So there you have it. You see, even a person there like the UKIP candidate, previous elected leader of this party, even he's clearly stated this is an attempt by the government to shut down free speech, to shut down your definition of how you want to live your life, and you cannot express this anymore. And who is, as I said to you, no one is having a vote on this in Parliament. It's an imposition being done by Michael Gove himself and his close crop of people. And if you go against them, then he will pull all his strings to make sure that he will lower you, that he will push you aside, that you will be castigated by him. This is a very, very fundamental point to observe. And this is something that we all be very, very mindful of, you see. It's not just categorizing Muslims or people of a far right or conservative nature. Rather, this is a categorization of people in general, that unless you don't agree with our select few individuals, such as Michael Gove, Dougie Smith, and other such people, then you are going to be pushed aside by us to an extent that is unfathomable. Now, I did see a comment from our dear brother Yahya in Australia, who's, I think, watched the Omen 1 film. And I've been hollering on for such a long period of time that you need to watch 4 films to understand who these people are, such as Michael Gove. You need to watch Omen 1. We need to watch The Satanic Rites of Dracula. It will all come in. You'll understand everything, how these people operate. So, in essence, that is the point that he's trying to make here, Nigel Farage. Now, I alluded to earlier, which I never really pointed out, from the Quran in Surah 5, verse 82, which makes mention that the strongest enmity to hatred to the believers will you find the Jews, the Zionists in particular, not the ordinary Jews, because Muslims are allowed to marry Jewish women. So it's not categorizing or discriminating against a particular group in generality. Will you find these particular set of Jews and the pagans, meaning those who associate partners with God, those who give the rights of God to others, such as imagery. So, in essence, this could well be constructed as people who will follow certain elements of the Hindu faith, those who associate the one true God by making many idolatrous forms of that God. Although Hinduism, to be fair, in essence, also just preaches that there's one God. It's only the third-party narratives within these multiplicity of different texts within the Bhagavad Gita or the Upanishads, which incline people to worshipping idolatry as such. So it's in reference to these specific people and these specific understandings. And to continue the verse, and it says in the Quran, but the nearest to you will you find those who say we are Christians. Amongst them, that's the Christians, there are people who are devoted to learning the truth, and they are not arrogant. So when we attend these marches, the people who are standing side by side with us, you've probably seen me attend these marches on the various Dawah Muslim channels, which I feature on, which we've had, by God's grace, hundreds of thousands of views attending these marches on Sam Dawah, Dawah to Soul, these types of organizations, in which we've got Christians, Englishmen standing next to us, vociferously protesting against the torment of the imagery that they're seeing and the non-action of their government. And rather than the government trying to resolve these issues, they are calling those very protesters mobs. I mean, who's behind this? I mean, what type of human being can you be not seeing these images of those untold suffering of the Palestinians, where over 30,000 people, from my last estimate, have died, yet not calling out Israel, rather funding Israel, giving them more weaponry to bomb them to kingdom come? So these are the type of people we're dealing with. They're sadistic masochists. They really are. We saw earlier from that lady's comment in the interview that we played at the beginning that they are people who are extreme in pleasure. I mean, they want to have such pleasure in their lives that they will, these governmental ministers, they often attend orgies, parties, sexual gratifications, blood sacrifices. We see these in these films, which I've been advocating people to watch, and often they have been caught out. So I know I'm going off on a long tangent. This is a pretty lengthy video. So probably best now I'll just keep quiet for a bit and allow the video to continue to play. But I'm pleading with everyone to pay close attention to all the points. And then we'll try to bring people up who want to make comments. But please carry on, Brother Muhammad, in the meantime.
I can see it's completely and utterly open-ended. I'm sure that everybody on all sides of the political debate will argue that they're being victimized, but I think this is open genuinely to a shutting down of free speech, maybe not by this government, but who knows what may come in the course of the following years. So tell me what you think. Is it open to abuse? I'd love to get your views, please. Farage@gbnews.com. Now, one member of parliament who was subjected to extremism, intolerable behaviour, was, of course, Tobias Ellwood, the Conservative Member of Parliament for Bournemouth East, with a mob of, I think, nearly 100 people for several hours turned up outside his house, shouting and chanting pretty hate-filled messages. Tobias, welcome back on the programme. Two things, really. One, I'd like to know what you think of this definition and whether you share my reservations about how it might be used in the future. And secondly, I don't think this definition actually helps MPs like you and would stop people gathering outside your house.
Well, firstly, good evening. And interesting you speaking about the European Union and reflecting back on that, going down memory lane. You and I agree on many things, and we both know that you and I disagree on many things, but we do it in a way that allows us to disagree in a form that allows debate to continue. I don't hate you for what you believe in. You don't hate me. The art of disagreeing remains strong between us, and that's so important. But that's not the case in what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 months. And that's why there's this question that's being raised, bigger question, fundamental question about who we are, what we stand for, what it means to be British and to live here, what binds us together, and how do we defend our open and tolerant way of life, our liberal parliamentary democracy, as Michael Gove was just speaking about. And since those deadly attacks by Hamas on the 7th of October, tensions between communities, within communities have been rising here. We've seen rise in anti-Muslim and anti-Semitism, hatred. Even the business of Parliament has been affected. And as you just touched on, MPs have been targeted as well. It's led to that big speech by the Prime Minister outside Downing Street on the 1st of March, where he wanted to address the spread of hate and division, and of course, Michael Gove's speech today. So this has a security implication. That's what it's about, because it's through these extremist groups that freedom of expression is being suppressed, actually. Hatred is promoted. And in the worst cases, young...
Okay, so notice what he just said, the latter comment that he made in regards to those marches taking place, where he's insinuating that this could become a hub of extremism. I mean, we're getting people of different backgrounds attending. This is not just a Muslim rally. Muslims are not the singular people attending. In fact, the majority of the people who've attended lots of these rallies are, in fact, the white Caucasian communities. People of all different backgrounds have been attending this. But why are they hell-bent to make it appear as if some extremist elements are going to pop out from within here? It's simply because they realize that the majority of people are totally against their actions. Why are they protesting outside these MPs' places? It's because these MPs who have the power to put pressure on Israel to cease these actions, they're the very, very people who are supporting them. So people are beginning to realize this now. Now, obviously, when you protest, you do it peacefully. You don't go around, making any doing any violence or any threats or anything of that disposition. But because these people control, and people are beginning to realize that they control, and they are all a little clique, shall we say, or a little clique, should I rather say, who come together, who formulate policies. They're the ones who are going to define to us what is extremism. They're the ones that are going to define to us what we can and cannot say. The new definition will be, look, tools, it needs to protect us. Protect who? I mean, who? I regularly walk the streets of London. I don't see any issues. I don't see any name calling of Muslims. I don't see any incidents which are being called out. This is absolutely preposterous. The whole idea is to curtail us so that we bend to their views. These are the very people, as I said, who run the government, particularly the gentleman on the right, Michael Gove, as I made mention. And we're seeing this more and more. And as this particular interview continues, but it's important for me to stop and make people reflect as to what is being said, you see. It's absolutely critical. So the fact that they've been criticizing these Palestinian protests is in itself because they don't want the public to be aware of what they're all about. They want to castigate the public when people are attending in their hundreds of thousands. There's one march I went to, I can assure you there was up to 1 million people in attendance. But if you read the news, they'll say only 50,000 people attended, where that is preposterous. I would hasten to say one of the protests had over 1 million protesters. I know because I've often been into gatherings with very, very large crowds, and I can estimate very, very quickly. So based upon this point, these are the individuals who people are realizing who are not prepared to vote. When the vote took place for, asking for a ceasefire, the majority of MPs couldn't vote in favor of asking for a ceasefire because of fear of what these people behind the scenes will do to them. So just continue, brother.
With a scant understanding of the Quran are recruited, radicalized, often online, to carry out deadly terrorist attacks here in the UK. So I would not want to.
So again, see, they're trying to scaremonger here now, that people who attend marches, who attend or have got a view contrary to them, they can become radicalized and do acts of terror, according to Mr. Elwood over here. So they're trying to put fear amongst the public that attending these marches where supposed extremists can turn up and, create havoc, which is nonsense. I mean, in all the marches that I've seen, the only act of, and I've been to every one of them in London in particular, central London, is when sometimes some exuberant youths throw some flares of the Palestinian flag, of the Palestinian colours. All that I've ever seen. And there are millions now, having been to these particular protests, that's the only action I've seen which could be deemed as somewhat antisocial, but it's nothing major. In football grounds, they regularly throw flares up in the grounds, and obviously they're allowed to do so by the authorities when they come into the grounds. So this is the only thing I've seen, which is a ridiculous statement to make on this particular part. But it's a definition of scaremongering, so people feel frightened of your neighbor next door or the Muslim, for example, when all we want people to realize is what those brutal events in Palestine are taking place. But these people want to put the wool over your eyes. Please continue, Brother Mohammed.
To see people like yourselves ever gagged in any sense. But I hope you'd agree there's also responsible use of freedom of speech. That's something that we need to recognize.
Tobias, I absolutely agree with that. But the question is, does what is stated here, does it do the job?
I think this is an evolving conversation, and the fact that we're talking about it, nobody is on this list yet, as has been put forward by Michael Gove. Very interesting to see Labour's response as well today. They didn't condemn it in any way. They largely agreed with it. I think this is an evolving conversation. We've gone through this very, very difficult period, and we have big questions to answer. I never thought that we'd see legislation required to protect war memorials, because nobody had ever challenged them before. We're now starting to do that because those behavioralist norms are being tested in all court forms of our society. Okay. And so important then, therefore, we debate these things properly and as a nation decide what is right and what is wrong.
So I'd just like to pause there, Brother Mohammed.
Thank you very much indeed.
Pause there. Thank you very much for pausing there. So look at the last comments he made regarding the cenotaphs. Now, a cenotaph are imagery or statues, rather, shall I say, in central London of some historical British figures, including Winston Churchill and other such people who have represented or been the face of Britain through history. Now, sometimes within these gatherings, because they come from a whole, imagine millions of people gathering. So sometimes people of a particular ethnicity, they like to have a few drinks, and all they do is have a bit of a jolly time on the cenotaph. Nothing major, nothing brutal is happening. But look how keen this individual is to protect simply a monument where people are dying in their multitudes, in their thousands and thousands in Israel, and there's no concern about that. They're simply concerned about a statue in the middle of London. Something inanimate they're worried about, where people are dying in front of their eyes, yet they cannot criticize those who are the perpetuators of this. So the government here, you see, is defining things. When he said to Nigel Farage just a short while ago that, we're not trying to curtail freedom of speech, but at the same time, we need to be aware. That's what is in essence said. But what he's trying to say there is that we will curtail your freedom of speech and what you can and cannot say, and we will introduce legislation to that effect, and there's nothing or a jot that you can do about it. This is a very important point to note, you see, what they're up to. So even, like I said, someone like Nigel Farage, who's been a victim of this, in my view, in the fact that he was castigated as well, simply because they hold on to these traditional values. Carry on, brother.
An evolving conversation is the view of Tobias Elwood. I'm joined in the studio by Abdullah Al-Andalusi, the co-founder of the Muslim Debate Initiative. Welcome to the programme. And Toby Young, the General Secretary of the Free Speech Union. Abdullah, there are some that say that this definition that Michael Gove put out today is aimed at Muslim groups. Do you believe that to be the case or not?
I think it was spurred on by the pro-Palestine protests that demanded a ceasefire against the massacre and plausibly a genocide against the Gaza.
I mean, many would disagree with that.
Well, let's say the ICJ review it. They'll probably review it better than you. But the issue is this, that everyone seems to have a short memory. People don't remember the Countryside Alliance and the fox hunting demonstrations that ran riot in Parliament Square. They actually burst into Parliament. At one point, Simon Hart organised public harassment campaigns of the MPs. And guess where his position now? He's now chief whip under Rishi Sunak.
Pause that. Thank you. What did Brother Andalusi say over here? Everyone's attention, please. This is critical. He just said in regard to a countryside protest took place against fox hunting in the UK, in which this particular chap that he's made mention of, the name escapes me. What was the name? Did he say, Brother Muhammad? Tony
Parliament. Hart? At one point, Simon Hart organised public harassment campaigns.
So Simon Hart instigated a public harassment campaign where they actually burst into Parliament to get what they wanted to come out and put pressure on the MPs. So imagine that. Isn't that an extremist act? Yet this very individual, this Mr. Hart, is now a chief whip in Rishi Sunak's government. Just pause and reflect what I've just said. This chap now is a chief whip in Rishi Sunak's government. It's because these people which would be deemed as an extremist act, they can put pressure on MPs, pressure on societies that this is how you have to enact us, or you have to enact everything we say. The media, within every facet of society, what we're telling you to do, this is how you must do it. This also includes the MPs, those who vote. They've got them by their necks as well. And if they go against their line, then they seek to demean them. They seek to push them aside. Everything that they want to be propelled is what is going to be propelled here. And like he said, that's a very good point that he's made about that particular individual, Mr. Hart, who is now the chief whip. But before he was holding that position, they burst into Parliament, intimidated the MPs, but they were never defined in that way of extremists. And this chap who led them is now the chief whip. Carry on, brother.
Of the MPs. And guess where his position now? He's now chief whip under Rishi Sunak. So the Conservative Party has no problem with rallying the mob and using mob potential harassment of MPs as all part of democracy. But when it comes to movements that
no,
were...
hang on, Abdullah, hang on.
Yeah,
I was there.
that's not true. Yeah.
I was there.
Sure.
On the countryside march.
No doubt.
You can be as rude as you like. That's fine. I was there. I was there on the countryside march. 406,000 of us marched through London. There wasn't a single arrest. There was no disorder. There wasn't even a piece of litter left behind. And the difference here, and yes, and I was involved in this. Not that I hunt, but I believe in people having the freedom to do within reason what they want. The difference is the lobbying of those members of parliament wasn't intimidatory. What happened in Parliament Square the day that the SNP resolution was due to be debated is MPs were frightened to leave the building.
So are you denying that there was no riot in Parliament Square due to the
I'm telling you that I was. I'm telling you that I was on the country.
And there was actually it's literally called public harassment campaigns.
I wasn't there on that day. I was there on the big march. But the point is,
we're not talking about when you were there. We're talking about the historical record. You can check out the riot that happened.
If any group bursts in and behaves badly and threatens or intimidates, it should be, of course, the law should be enforced.
Well, it really happened.
My question to you,
it really happened.
My question to you is: do you think this definition of extremism is helpful or not?
No, it's if you ban something which is to do with people's beliefs, that is not about inciting violence, then this is thought policing. And in the modern world, I often say that the term extremism, which is an unhelpful term, at least the Americans have the wherewithal to say countering violent extremism, not just extremism. But using the term extremism today is is the modern secular version of denouncing heresy and heretics.
It's no. I get the point. It is dangerous, and it depends how it's used. And I agree with you on that point. Toby Young, Free Speech Union. I'm really worried about this. I do actually take Abdullah's point that people are perfectly entitled to their opinions. They're perfectly entitled to let their elected representatives know those opinions. It's a question of whether it's done with intimidation, isn't it?
Yes, and clearly this definition of extremism. It doesn't just encompass people who we currently think of, I think, as extremists and who might be captured by the criminal law. It's below the criminal law threshold. So it falls into the legal but harmful grey area, which is something, as a free speech lobbyist, I'm obviously suspicious of. I mean, I think the starting point, and I think I disagree with Abdullah here, is that we do have a problem with Islamic extremism in this country. We see it in our city centres every Saturday. I'm not saying everyone on the pro-Palestinian.
Right. Everybody, please attention. The last comment of this particular individual. What did he say? He said that we do have a problem with Islamic extremism, particularly in city centres. Now, what does he mean by that? Is he saying Muslims are running amok by forcing other people to convert to their religion? What he's saying is exactly that in London in particular, in many shopping areas, shopping centres, Muslims do dawah, meaning invite people to Islam. Many people become Muslim as a result. In fact, we do dawah in Stratford every Saturdays, where Westfield is, where the 2012 Olympic Games took place. Now, he said just now that we do have a problem with Islamists running amok. What he's trying to basically say is that those people who are inviting peacefully people to their religion, they are in the city centres actually. Like we are in the city centres, but they know full well that Islam is spreading, and Islam holds those values which people want to accept. They don't want imposition. So this last comment he made about the city centres would imply that some maniac Muslims are running around forcing everybody to become Muslims, which is nonsense. That if you know, let's play that little bit back again, bro, so people understand that point.
With Islamic extremism in this country, we see it in our city centres every Saturday. I'm not saying everyone on the
pause that. Every Saturday, we see it in our city centres. Brother Muhammad does dawah in Coventry city centre. I do dawah in Stratford. I've done in many, many places in London. So notice that is a specific point suggesting that these Muslims who are having lots of success with people becoming Muslims, that is intolerable to us. because they will then, people who accept Islam, who get to know Islam, will understand those values that Islam holds on to, which is contrary to the values of the satanic system, which is being thrust upon us. This is the reason, you see. Very, very important point to note. Please.
Is Toby right on that point? Do we have a problem?
Well, how is demonstrating to stop the massacre of civilians in Gaza anything to do with extremism?
Well, I think. Well, go on. The answer is not everyone on those protests could conceivably be designated as extremists, but there are some extremists on those protests.
But the
like
vast majority of those are not extremists.
Images. So a very good point.
Yeah, I want to say something also, Brother Mustafa.
Yeah.
As you can see from some of these images, there are so many people from white Europeans within the crowd. There are different people. You can see different cultures, different backgrounds in the groups here protesting in the crowd. So, it's not just people wearing so-called, headscarves and niqabs and people with big ginger beards and whatnot. It's a mixture of the community here of London, or whatever this location is. I would say is a very good mix of different people from different backgrounds. Wouldn't you say that, Brother Mustafa?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a central London. You can see the cenotaphs in the background. Now, again, they've not shown any actual visual images in terms of any desecration of these cenotaphs. Some people may have just got a bit exuberant, probably jumped on top of a cenotaph, which is, by the way, it's not built of plastic. These are proper, proper statues in the total sense of the word. So people simply go on there. I mean, going back some time ago, many people would even who've of a particular disposition would often drink alcohol, not at these marches, I'm talking about other times, and just take pictures by jumping onto top of these cenotaphs. It's not that the cenotaph is going to collapse. So these are ridiculous statements that they're coming out with. And that is particular march, we see, for example, and I'm sure we can see further imagery, in which suggestion that, there's unruly behavior or things which are happening, but there's nothing going on. People of all, the brutal fact is that people of all different backgrounds are coming together to protest at the brutality that they're witnessing, but the government cannot stomach it. So they're trying to categorize those who do march, like the Islamists. Like I said, for me, for example, I've been going to these protests. I've been distributing so much literature about Islam. I've been having interviews with the public who are vociferously against the war and are fuming with their governments for doing absolutely nothing. So they're beginning to realize now this counter narrative, which they used to dominate by their outlets such as the BBC here in the UK, with social media being rampant now, that they can't hide these things anymore. So they now want to curtail everyone and put another community of people to become frightened, to think, this may happen to you if such and such protests come through. But people of all dispositions, they've come together to protest against the brutality that they're suffering. What type of human beings are they which cannot have sympathy for the brutality that the Palestinians have incurred, you see, over such a long period of time? So this is something for you to bear in mind. Continue, brother.
Is on the back of their jackets.
And that may well be true.
Carrying jihadi flags.
But if there are people that genuinely are extremists and are inciting
just stop there, brother. Just stop there.
Then we need to know about it.
Look, end the occupation, freedom for Palestine flag there. Can you see anyone having any extremist literature or causing for violence and doing acts which would be unacceptable? Nothing there. Just ordinary people expressing their views in the occupation, and for them, that's extremists. They're extremists who are marching against the brutality. And we can see from this imagery, excellent image here, a group of people from different backgrounds, Caucasian people, male and female, Muslims, male and female, people of different European nationalities. I've interviewed many people from Europe as well, from Western Europe, from Eastern Europe. They're all united against this, but the government won't listen. This is our democracy in action. You can demonstrate, but in effect, stuff your demonstration. We're going to do whatever we want. It's a pathetic. The system is very pathetic in this sense. Go ahead, brother.
Police will arrest them. There's already existing legislation that will stop defacing of cenotaphs, that will stop people from inciting violence, inciting racism. That already exists.
And we
don't need any extremism.
Well, in some ways, maybe that point's right. Do we need this definition?
Well, I've got a sort of broad concern and then a precise concern. My broad concern is,
we saw another flag which has caused a lot of issues in the media recently. The slogan which says, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." Now, for some bizarre reason, the government have turned this upside down to say that people want to wipe away Israel from the face of the earth, intolerance towards Jewish people. Absolute nonsense. That is basically saying that because Israel is next to the sea, so from that river to the sea, they will be free. The Palestinians will be free one day. Don't they have a right to live? Don't they have the right to live? Don't they have human rights? So one day they will be free. That's all they're saying. But look how the government has twisted it to say, oh, they're causing for the annihilation of a particular people or a particular country. The very country which was based upon and grounded upon acts of violence from particular terrorist Zionist organizations, which even bombed the British during the time in Jerusalem at the King David Hotel, when they took over and they butchered the Palestinians relentlessly over a good 10-year period between 1948 and 1958, where they went on their crazy grand land grab escapades. So, these are some of the points, just so you can continue, Deborah.
I'm not sure that there is a robust evidence base to suggest that if you define certain groups as extremists and you prevent them from participating in public life, which is essentially the strategy here, that will actually counter extremism. It hasn't worked very effectively before. In some cases, people can claim, look, I'm on a banned list, I'm an extremist according to the Tory government. That could actually enhance their appeal and make them more attractive, not less attractive to vulnerable young men in danger of radicalization. So that's my broad concern. I'm not sure this works as a strategy for countering extremism. My more precise concern, and this is probably where we agree, Abdullah, is that the definition, I mean, the government can't come up with a definition that just captures Islamic extremists, but nobody else. That could be too easily challenged. Sure. And the government clearly thinks it's not just a problem with Islamic extremists. There are some far-right extremists we should be worried about too. They point to Nick Griffin's endorsement of George Galloway, etc. But the problem is when they try and come up with a broader, more universal definition of extremism, the risk is...
So Nick Griffin was the leader of a party here in Britain called the British Nationalist Party, a party which had extreme supposed far-right tendencies. Now, this person, Nick Griffin, was given a great public platform by the government to speak mainly about what he portrayed as negative impacts of Islam. But when he spoke out against certain government economic systems, he was then castigated by the government. He was then vilified by the very government who was supporting him when he was speaking out against the Islamic narrative. But the beauty of the matter here, you see, is that the people who are for this particular discipline, the far right, they're beginning to understand slowly, very, very slowly, that Islam is not the issue. We've got much in common with them. And once this barrier will break down, then we can unite as people to reject what is being imposed upon us by this esoteric system. Notice what he said. He said it's not going to be sufficient enough just to define Islamic extremism, because that is easily challenged. Correct. Because there's nothing that you have brought forward which will be substantiated in law. If the Muslim Council of Britain have very clearly said that we will take the Home Secretary to court if he declares such statements he has made in public. He knows that full well as well. That's why he made it in Parliament. So this particular individual here has made mention that this also includes the far right. It's why, as I've repeated several times, is that we have that commonality between us in terms of our standards of living. Our standards and our methodology and our views on living. And that is what they see as these powers that be see as two ends of the coin, who we want to make clash with each other, categorize both of them as being far right in their disposition, and hence make them at loggerheads with each other, and at the same time categorize them both as extremists when in fact they share those commonalities. That's all it is. This is a matter of thought police. They want to stop you leading a life which is pleasurable to your creator, to a creator manifest, you see, in the form of that one supreme being. This is what it's all about. They want to propel a new world agenda. Please continue, brother.
Is it's going to capture groups that none of us would want to see banned from participation.
No, I agree.
Like anti-abortion activists, gender-critical feminists.
The worry with this, as to which groups are going to be deemed to be extremists, or perhaps which individuals will be deemed, is that it's civil servants that'll make the decision, and that worries me as well. Final thought.
I think it's one organisation that should be deemed to be extreme. They want to clamp down.
What did Nigel Farage just say? He says it will be the civil servants who will make this decision. This is a crucial point of this entire interview, everybody listening on. These civil servants are those who are in the background, who are essentially serving a purpose of these new world policies that we have. They're the ones who decide things. Michael Gove, all these other people are the heads of that, or the spokesman for this new system that they want everybody to live in. But these are the very people who attend seances and satanic rituals in central London, for example, where they delve in the occult, the supernatural, where judges and barristers, after a hard day in Holborn, will attend on the say-so of their female clerks to a court. They will unwind after a hard day's work by going to these seances and observing supernatural events that occur, because they are very wealthy and they've got lots of power. Judges have all the wealth as you can imagine, so they want more out of life. They want more of a kick. So when these ushers to a court, these female ushers, they take them to these seances in central London, where certain orgies take place, where promiscuity takes place, where satanic elements take place. Now, these are the people to whom they take orders from. So the Satan, for example, in Islam, in Christianity, is a figure who is rejected by God. And we know that those who reject it by God are represented by humans as well, those who represent Satan. And who represent Satan are these very people who want to push us into a new world order of living according to their definitions of what is a structured society, of what we can and cannot do, of what we can and cannot say, going against our fundamental, inherent historical methodologies of living. And hence, this is a very, very important point in history that we are now following, you see, and we need to come together as people in this regard. Please continue, brother.
Me as well. Final thought.
I think it's one organisation that should be deemed to be extreme. They want to clamp down upon people's right to demonstrate. The whole point of demonstration is to give some kind of democratic pressure to politicians. That's the whole point of demonstrations. What's the point of them? It wants to clamp down. It wants to discriminate on organisations and individuals based on their beliefs, which goes against the Human Rights Act Schedule 1, which is what the extremist definition is based upon, apparently. And this organisation is the British government. They fall foul of their own definition.
I think that may be stretching it a bit.
And I think, proof arguments to be made for that.
But I tell you
what the extremist definition is based upon, apparently. And this organisation is the British government. They fall foul of their own definition.
I think that may be stretching it a bit.
And I think, proof arguments to be made for that.
But I tell you what, I mean, I could be in real trouble, because there's an organisation out there called Hope Not Hate, and they've just produced their State of Hate 2024 report. And interestingly, they are...
Yeah, I just want to pause there for a second. I have posted the link. If anybody wants to jump on and share their thoughts and maybe quiz Brother Mustafa and get some more information regarding this topic that we're talking about, feel free to jump on there. We had quite a few people in the chat asking for the link. So the link has been put and pinned also. So please jump on. We're on for another 15, 20 minutes. Yeah, okay, not a problem, inshallah. Sister, no worries. We're on for another about 15, 20 minutes. So this is a fantastic opportunity for you guys to come on and raise some points, concerns, or even questions towards Brother Mustafa. Brother Mustafa, go ahead.
Yeah. And so whilst we wait for people to come up, this has been a very useful interview to define, you see. And, obviously, to do justice to such a topic in regards to people and who they are, it will take quite a considerably lengthy show to go into considered detail. So, in essence, what we observe in conclusion before we bring people up, and I'm trying to summarize things due to the constraint of time,
Fantastic.
is that these individuals, such as Michael Gove, who I've already made mention, Smith, they're the ones who run the country. They're the ones who will define to us what the system is all about. These are the very people who are seeking to redefine our values, our common shared values we have. And they are hell-bent going to go to that extent. We know what they're all about. We need to come together as people to say we will not accept this. You're not going to impose your definitions of what you deem as acceptable as an unacceptable onto us. You can't tell us that we can't march in demonstrations. And obviously, these are only paltry acts that we can do in terms of our rejection, our disgust at the events taking place in the Middle East, and our governments are doing nothing. Furthermore, as I've made mention on so many occasions, that the Antichrist system, which is rushing towards the perpetual return of Jesus, Christians believe that, Muslims believe this, he will come, but a setting is being done, and the setting is now pushed to this agenda. You see, we're going to live our lives according to a world order unlike any time in history. Brother Muhammad, I think your mic is on off. So
yeah, I've got people in the backstage right now. I'm just asking the people backstage, please put your cameras on, unless we know who you are. If you're a regular, we know who you are. Yeah, okay, Max, fantastic. If you want to keep your camera on, you can. Muslim apologist backstage. If you don't mind, Brother Mustafa, we got Max coming on. He was very hyper in the chat. We'd love to get his viewpoint on this. Is that okay, Brother Mustafa? We can get some guests on.
Oh, fantastic! Please do so.
Okay, I'm also going to add the Muslim apologist on also. So Muslim apologist, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Okay, Max, I'm going to put you on now. Hi, Max. Please introduce yourself. Where are you calling from? Yeah, we can hear you, brother. Where are you calling from?
Yeah, I'm calling from India. I belong to a Hindu family. I'm basically an atheist, and I have no stakes in this Israel and Palestine war. But the thing is, I have a question which I never could get an answer for. Okay. I don't know the history of Hamas and Israel and Palestine. What did Israel do that is justified? That justifies killing 1,400 people on 7th October. What did Israel do?
Got the question, Max. We will go one step at a time.
I don't come here with any hate for
No,
any
got
party.
you.
I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. We got the question. Hold on for that. Food for thought. And hopefully the question will be put to Brother Mustafa now, if Brother Mustafa doesn't mind. What basically provoked this particular attack on the 7th of October? What did Israel do prior for them to do that attack? It's a very interesting question. Max, was that roughly the question? Yes?
Yes. I want to know what justifies killing of 1,400 people.
Okay, thank you.
So absolutely nothing justifies the killing of any innocent individual in any way, shape, or form. However, we've got to look at the historical context in which this Palestine-Israel issue has been going through history, you see. You've had a people subjugated and oppressed for going on 3/4 of a century, or even longer than that, to be honest. They've been the source of brutality unheard of in contemporary history. And hence, they have been crying out for public help for a very, very long time. They've been begging people to help them. No one has been able to help them. It's a total apartheid system there. People in Gaza, in particular, where these events have been taking place, is commonly referred to as an open-air prison, the most concentrated open-air prison on the planet, where people are deprived of basic human rights. They are absolutely shattered, to the extent that even apartheid at its peak in South Africa was never as vociferous or never as discriminatory against such people as you will see in the Palestine issue. So we know, for example, how the British played such a fundamental role, just like your country in India. They played a fundamental role in dividing the country up post-partition in 1947, 1948. So the same thing they did in the Middle East as well, where, if you are familiar with the Balfour Declaration going back to 1917, where in support of getting the Arab support in Palestine in particular against the Ottoman Empire, they promised the Arabs that they would, of Palestine, that they would have their country back, being given independence. But they never had no intention of doing so at all. They wanted to divide Palestine up between France and Britain, going back in 1917. So they allowed then slowly Jewish people to come in post the First World War and the Second World War as well. And this in turn made the situation in the Middle East as to what it happened. We know the deadly events that occurred, how Jewish mafia organizations and terrorist organizations infiltrated even the British, and they committed atrocities against the Palestinians by doing mass land grab from them. They use so much methodology in which to crush. So I'm giving you a historical account, Max. So if you can just please, Paul, if you can just put yourself on mute so that you understand where this is all coming from. So this has been going on now for several decades, in which Muslims and Palestinians in particular have been suffering terribly at the hands of the brutal occupation that they have suffered from. Now, that land that we are making mention to, historically belonging to the Palestinians, and where this event occurred on October the 7th, as I made mention, nobody will condone or nobody will say that the loss of human life would be deemed to be acceptable in any way, shape, or form. However, there are much evidences to suggest, firstly, that in some capacity, that this is also an inside job known as the Hannibal effect, caused by the Israelis themselves in order to perpetuate a invasion of Gaza, which by most accounts now has been shown to have considerable amount of gas reserves, which will be a tremendous source of economic boom should Palestinians or the Gazans have that opportunity to use those gas resources as well. So the events that occurred actually over the cross-border interaction was that there's a continuous going back and forth between the Muslim organizations and the Israeli military. So on this occasion, there was an Israeli attempt to infiltrate Hamas, and Hamas then responded back by throwing certain or hitting back with certain missiles. And they were based upon these camps that were in on the Gaza border, which separates Gaza from Israel. Now, the army which came forth, the Israeli army which came forth, they were the ones who got in the crossfire of this. But in no way, shape, or form did Hamas, in my understanding, have any attempt to kill innocents. In fact, in their charter, it states that you cannot harm the public, you cannot harm women, you cannot harm the elderly, you cannot harm children in any way, shape, or form. But the Israeli governments would have put these people in those environments, in military camps, which separate the two, knowing that once they hit back at our military excursions, that innocent people will die. So this is a common theme. It's called the Hannibal effect, which I've made mention, is to do away with your own for a particular purpose. So
I have a question.
So I'm just because I need to, because you don't seem to know much about the history, as you made mention. So this is what is the reality of the background. The people who, my friend, who have been subjugated for nearly 1 century, 3/4 of a century, who have been living in the most atrocious conditions. They want their freedom. According to international law, resisting occupation is not an offense. It is not a crime. It is not. In fact, it advocates that you have a right to defend yourself. But because they are a helpless people, in view of the brutal Israeli war machine, which is, as we've seen in the television imagery, pummeling Gaza into oblivion, these are the very people who are suffering. And we're seeing this happen. Go ahead now, Max.
Yeah, so my first question is on 7th October.
Max, what Mustafa just told you right now, did that sink in? Can you repeat what Mustafa mentioned?
Yeah. So, yeah, sure. Basically, they were being kept, the Palestine people were kept in an open prison. They were oppressed for centuries. And you told me about 7th October. And by the way, I don't like I don't like if anyone gets oppressed. It doesn't matter if they're whatever religion they are in. I don't like people getting oppressed. So I'm with you on this side, right? Maybe Israel actually oppressed you for years. I wouldn't appreciate that from Israel. My question is, did on 7th October, did Israel instigate Palestine and then Palestine killed 1,400 people, or was it planned? Was it planned to attack Israel on 7th October, or did Israel instigate on that specific day? Like what happened that day?
I've already responded to that. I've given you a detailed response in terms of what happened. But just for your own peace of mind, to give that specific answer, because I gave you a historical account of the setup. But essentially speaking, Israel has military camps on the border with Gaza, you see. So they frequently intrude into Gazan territory, and they have back and forth with various Muslim organizations, such as Hamas, as an example, who are defending their borders. So when Hamas then responds to those incursions and to the killings that take place by Israelis on a day-to-day basis, which is not reported in Gaza and in West Bank as well, so Hamas retort. So in that sense, they then put their own people in these military camps, these civilians and so forth, and they then get caught in the crossfire. But it's not that Hamas is targeting these individuals. Rather, they're trying to hit back at those Israeli forces which are doing incursions into their land. And they make it clear on their charter. So you've got to understand, according to their charter, they make it clear that we cannot harm any people who are innocent, women, elderly. We cannot harm anyone. It's only combatants that we seek to address.
Okay,
So
I completely understand.
Yeah, so the figure has actually been revised to 1,200 now. It was previously understood to be 1,400, but it's in fact 1,200. Now, the hostages which were taken by Hamas, apparently, the media reports are very, very clear that they were treated with utter respect, with honor, and I'm sure you've seen that within the media as well. How women who were treated with well looked after, young children were well looked after. It wasn't this image that they were stuck in some basement floor and starved and beaten or whatever. That did not happen. So it doesn't make any sense that they would seek to kill innocent people and take hostages and treat those hostages very well. That makes it's not consistent. Then there was that accusation of the beheading of babies, which everybody knows is nonsense. The media came out with all this initial understanding, which later became very, very clear. That's what is something concocted all up. You're aware of this, aren't you, Max? Even if you're in India.
Yes. I've even heard Piers Morgan, the interviewer in UK, said that Hamas was actually live streaming the beheading of people. Is it true? I didn't see those videos. Is it true?
That's exactly. See, that was the accusation that he made, but that was all proven to be nonsense. These were just images taken from another clip involving some other historical event, but nothing to do with the Palestinian issue at all in any way, shape, or form. This has all been negated. The beheading of the babies, everybody knows that's been negated. But the Zionist-run press machine wanted to propel that. But once they were rejected upon this understanding, then they had to come out and openly declare that this was just something that the Zionist machine just made up to make it appear that they were dealing with monsters at hand. So,
okay, I understand. So I understand that those videos were of some other event, and the media is trying to show that Hamas is doing it, right? So I understand that. So I have one more question that is very important. Okay. And I'm asking from an outside perspective. I have zero stakes in this war. Okay. My question is, if Hamas was like on the border fighting with people, and Israel is now bombing hospitals, which is very wrong. I don't support that. My question is, why is Hamas hiding below the hospitals? Like they are the border control. They are on the border. They should fight like men. Why are they hiding behind hospitals and schools?
Max. I'll be honest with you. If I served in the military myself for the British Army. I'm here in the UK. If one side of the military have only got AK-47s and maybe rocket launchers, right, homemade rocket launchers, and the other side have got air force. They've got tanks. They've got sea crafts or battleships, artillery. They got mortars. They've got everything. Is that a fair fight, Max? Is that a fair
No,
fight?
no, no, it's not a fair fight.
And we know for a fact the embargo that's been put on Gaza, that nothing is really allowed to go inside that particular location when it comes to military weapons. They've got no air force, they've got no army. Basically, Brother Mustafa, I do apologize for jumping in,
Oh, no, it's fine.
but you know, if it was a fair fight, Max, and of course Israel is being funded by America, Germany, European countries, the UK. Millions and billions of pounds are being sent of military hardware for Israel. Is Hamas getting the same? Are they getting the same weaponry? No, they're not. It's not a fair
Not
fight
really.
at all. This is literally like Amir Khan, which is a famous boxer. I don't know, have you heard of Amir Khan fighting somebody like Anthony Joshua? Is a completely different fight. Completely different fight. Is unfair. So Max, come on, common sense really.
No, no,
We should
but I
really have
understand.
you.
So if I was Hamas and I knew that it's unfair fight and I'll lose, I'll surrender. I'll actually surrender rather
Okay,
than
Max,
risking
Max, 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 Max,
my people
Max.
in
Really,
hospital.
Max,
Are you
Max. I
getting
don't
what I'm
know.
saying? If
I don't know what you're
if
saying,
I
Max.
am
If
Brother
no, no, no,
Muhammad.
wait,
Max,
let me complete my point. Let me complete my point. My point is, if I have a disadvantage, I wouldn't hide under a hospital, because if I'm hiding under a hospital, I'm risking the life of the people who are in hospital.
So
I
Max,
am basically risking
Max,
it.
just one
So
moment, please.
I'd rather surrender.
Can you hold on? Pause. Max, the whole issue here, you see, is that they haven't been hiding under hospitals. They've had certain other places where they've hidden underground tunnels, but not under the hospitals, because this is an excuse for Israel to deconstruct and to blow up the infrastructure of the Gazans, the hospitals, the very lifeline to which they can be treated, is to do away with this. There were videos as well. I mean, we can't bring up every video as evidence, but there are videos which are very much available on YouTube and on, even being fair, even on the national media, which show that these accusations that that Hamas is hiding under hospital tunnels has been proven to be nonsense. Absolute complete nonsense, which has just been made up in order to authenticate their brutal bombing of their opponents. So essentially, what we need to observe, Max, is we need a conclusion. The two-state solution formula, which has been espoused even by European governments, has been rejected out of hand by Benjamin Netanyahu, to the extent that it seems to have been causing a division amongst his allies, meaning Biden and Sunak and other Western leaders. So we need to come to a solution that Palestinians, that is their land which has been stolen. Would you be happy if people come from, just say, for example, from China and took northern India away from you? Will you
No, I wouldn't be happy.
would you accept it? Wouldn't you
No.
stand up and fight against the Chinese in this
Yeah,
case?
I would retaliate. I would retaliate.
Precisely, my friend. So you've got to consider all this in historical view. We need to know what the British. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the British machinations in during the time that they lost their empire. They caused all this havoc in Kashmir, in where you are, particularly in India. The tragedy of the Kashmiri people, where the majority are Muslims. Yet, as a result of the division, the partition, they remained with India, and we know the brutality that has been taking place. UN resolution, 2 UN reports from the 90s about the massacre of Kashmiris, going back now nearly 35-40 years, since 1989, in the brutality that has been taking place over there as well. So these are unfortunate events that have been taking place around the world, and an occupier cannot occupy another person. It's against international law. It's against UN resolution 242 and 338, which specifically says to Israel to get out of the West Bank and Gaza. But they don't do it because they've got American support. So this is the issue, my friend, that we really need to we need to get to the bottom of why this is happening. Now, suppose there are two independent states, one Palestine, one Israel, whatever they want to name themselves. Now, they're leading their own lives. You know, they've got their own governments. Whoever then starts an issue post-agreement will be the perpetrator, you see. So that is the way to see who are the real people who are the oppressors. So just say we have a state of Palestine.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I had these questions, but I never had someone who can answer this. So I really appreciate you answering my questions. And secondly, I really don't want anyone to win or lose. I just want this war to end. Basically, I actually am not against Palestine or Israel. Like, I'm not even against Israel and Russia, Ukraine and Russia. I just don't like wars, and I'm glad, I'm happy, I appreciate that you were able to answer my questions. I really appreciate this, and thanks for letting me in.
No, you're absolutely very
Max,
welcome. Thank you.
Max, I got your email. Thank you for leaving your email. We can hopefully arrange a discussion. We have a brother in South Africa right now, Yusuf Ismail. He's actually has been requesting to talk to somebody regarding this topic. So if you would be interested in having a discussion with Yusuf, we can definitely arrange it. And I got your email address, and we can set something up in the future.
Sure. Which country are you in right now? Like, so that I can know what time. Just
we're
send
in
me
the
email me the time and date, and I'll be there.
Yeah, we're in the UK. Both of us, me and Mustafa, are in the UK. Okay, thanks for
Perfect.
coming on, Max. Take care.
Yeah, take care, you guys. Take care. Bye.
Thank you so much. Take care. So that was an interesting conversation. So Max had some preconceived notions, which has always been propelled by the media in general, but he's been able to get some answers, and he's been satisfied with those answers. So in the end of the day, there has to be a solution to these issues, you see. There has to be a solution. Now, anyone post-solution who starts the trouble, that will be deemed the aggressor, the one to whom one can retaliate. So imagine there's a Palestine state now involving the West Bank or whatever agreement can possibly become. Post such an agreement, whoever then is a perpetrator or the instigator of war, just say Palestinians instigate war, which it won't be the case, but if they instigate the war in the form of a two-state solution, then they would have to bear the repercussions. But because they don't have their rights have been taken away, you know, their land has been taken away, everything's been taken away from them. You know, it's like they just say you live in a big mansion with with a swimming pool outside. Just as someone like Beverly Hills in the US. I mean, we know we've got a number of people from the US in our audience, and then you get kicked out of your home and said, okay, you can live in that broken down shed in the corner with no amenities, no access to anything, and that is how you have to lead your life. And by the way, you know, you everything that you owned has been taken away as well. All your economic rights have been taken away as well. So this is the brutal fact of what is happening in Israel or in Palestine rather. And the only way is a two-state solution. We've got to be pragmatic. As Muslims, some Muslims may say, no, we want all of Palestine back. At the way things are at the moment, even getting Israel to come to the negotiating table is going to prove next to impossible. And the Americans and the British, they will not in any way, shape or form lower their support for Israel. They will support Israel to their teeth, namely because of their in the second return of Jesus. And that because the Jews must be in Zion, the Americans in particular, of an evangelical nature, they believe that this has to be the case. So they will support Israel no matter what. And that is the crux of the matter. No, thank you, King Max, on helping you answer these questions.
Yeah, so, maybe I was a bit harsh on him. I do apologize if I was harsh on him, but sometimes it just rattles my brain sometimes. If somebody's going to come into my house and take my children, take my loved ones, am I just supposed to say, take them? Or am I supposed to like at least defend myself and defend them? And if if I happen to be martyred or my family are martyred in the process of defending my own castle, as they say here, Mustafa, you know, every man's a king to his castle, and we are entitled here in the UK to, you know, if somebody comes in, and I'm saying in the USA, you know, some people have guns, you know, in the USA. If you come onto private property and if you are shot basically the person who owns the property has got rights to defend his property and his belongings. So sometimes it's a no-brainer for me when people come on and say, "Oh yeah, but the Palestinians should just give it up." And then why should they give it up? Where's your thought process, brothers and sisters, that if somebody's going to come into your house and take everything away, like Brother Mustafa said, and put you back in the garden where the dog's kennel is, and you and your family are going to live in that dog's kennel and get fed once a day and showered once a month or whatever, and if you try to break out, you are beaten up and put back in there. And then where's the thought process? I do apologize, but yeah, guys, we got another about 10 minutes left. If you want to come on, say a few words, feel free to come on. Also, a big shout. I just want to mention, this is really serious, guys, especially for the Muslims in the chat. We have to be respectful to the non-Muslims in the chat. So please be respectful in the chat. This is one thing I want to mention. Since Sister Hindsight is joining us right now, our elder, Sister Hindsight, thank you I'm bringing you on now. Hi, sister. How you doing, Hindsight?
I'm doing really well. How are y'all doing?
Yeah,
I'm good.
I'm good. Always delighted to hear from you. Hey, how have you been?
I've been okay. Listen, I don't even know how to begin. I have so many questions and everything, and I have my own thoughts. And I'm not educated on the beginnings of this whole Israel thing, becoming a nation, and all that. To my knowledge, from my understanding, they were given Israel as a homeland through the Balfour Declaration. Am I correct? And
the thing is, the thing is, before Mustafa jumps in and gives a bit more in-depth answer to this, is like Hindsight. You've got your house, right? And then a third person will say, "I'm going to give this house to this second person." Are you, the owner of the house, are you going to say, "Okay, fine"? No, you are entitled to say, "No, this is my house." Who are you, meaning the third person, meaning the British, to say you're going to give it to the second people, meaning the Israel or the Jewish people who were massacred and whatnot in Europe by the hands of the Christians, right? To say, okay, now you're going to have this land which belongs to the first person. For me, it doesn't make any sense, Sister Hindsight. Sorry, Mustafa will
no,
give
it doesn't.
more.
It doesn't, and that would upset me. You're right.
So sorry, Hindsight. So you just made a little historical error. In 1917, in the Balfour Declaration, it was that's to do with the British and the French during the First World War. As I explained, they had the control of the surrounding countries in and around Palestine at the time, which was at that stage controlled by the Ottoman Turkish Empire. But because they wanted support of the Arabs, they promised that once the Second World War ends and the Ottoman control of Palestine will end, therefore we will support the Arab nation for this independent state of Palestine, meaning to say that we will give control back to you Palestinian Arabs who were the rightful owners of the land of Palestine. Because the majority of the people there were Muslims. I would say about 85% to 90% of the people there in Palestine were Muslims living at the land during that First World War period. But behind the scenes, they were going to backstab these people who they wanted to help, and they in turn were going to divide Palestine up between Britain and France. So they allowed the migration of the Jews to come into Palestine, particularly post Second World War. But at that time, when this happened, then the Jews in particular, they had some terrorist organizations which would even bomb the British consulate in Jerusalem, in the King David Hotel, because Britain was trying to get as much of control possible. But because they'd allowed the Jews to come in post the Second World War and were putting them out to different areas of Palestine, these terrorist Jewish organizations, they were bombing the British as well. So Britain post Second World War was on its knees as a result of the pressure of the Second World War had on their country. So they just moved
I need to
aside.
study. I never heard any of this.
Oh yes, the tragic events which have happened in the history of Palestine was as a result of the Makhba, the catastrophe which is commonly referred to, in which the Palestinian people were butchered relentlessly. The land was grabbed by these terrorist organizations. Thousands and thousands of Palestinians were killed, and their land was forcibly taken. Now, what's this all about, Heinz? I mean, you've probably heard me speak about all this. Now, I know you come from a Christian background, and it's incumbent upon you for you to understand. And obviously, from your very nice accent, you live somewhere in the south of the United States. This is just my assumption. Am I correct there?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So you see, you've been fed the history that the Jews must be in Zion in order to propel the return of Christ. This is a fundamental belief that Christian evangelicals have, you see. It's absolutely incumbent upon them. They've been waiting for the return of Christ for 2,000 years, hindsight. 2,000 years. The prophecies in 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, Mark's gospel, Matthew's gospel, was that his return was imminent. He was going to return within the lifetime of the disciples. This didn't happen, hindsight. It didn't happen. So these are failed prophecies.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yes.
Gosh, that'd be a whole new discussion altogether. But
yeah, but I'm just giving you.
There is a prophecy that does exist that says that let me see, in the last days that Israel would be gathered back into the land and never to be separated again, and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's there and everything. But I'm trying to figure out, huh?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Continue with your question.
No, I'm just trying to figure out a solution to this thing. What is a feasible solution to where Gaza and Israel can lay down their weapons and just not hate each other anymore? You know what I mean? Is there something? There's got to be something.
There is something there. According to United Nations resolutions, which Western countries like the US and UK are great supposed proponents of, they often quote resolutions when it suits them. But there are two resolutions currently being passed for the last 50 years. UN Resolution 242 and UN Resolution 338, that Israel must end its occupation of the West Bank and Gaza and return those lands which have been stolen. That's the United Nations resolutions. And in turn, Israel will get...
now they left. They pulled out of Gaza in 2005. Am I correct?
That's right. They pulled
out. Am I correct
in
that?
Yes, they pulled out of certain, but it was only certain autonomous rule that the Palestinian Gazans had. It wasn't a complete control of the land. It was only an autonomous rule that they had.
Oh.
Now, the Gaza in itself is not a very big place at all to be. It's called an open air prison. Such is the way that they've been affected.
It's pretty small, from what I understand.
Yes, very, very small. At the same juncture as well, you need the West Bank, which is where all the significant territories, as we know, Jerusalem and Bethlehem and all these places, they need to be turned in as well. They need to be handed back to the Palestinians, which is their land, you see. That's the whole issue that we have at stake. Historically, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, prior to 1970, they were all living there in peace and harmony. There was no issues between them. So it was only with the advent of the events that subsequently occurred. Now, one thing for you to note, Heinz, is very important, which I love speaking about, and this is something I want you to consider very, very deeply, even more deeply than the history of these events that have taken place. And that is that Israel today, did you know, hindsight, is the only country in the Middle East which actually holds secular values. Actually they are proponents and propagandists of the LGBTQ. They actually accentuate that. So in my understanding, what's happening, I find it, can you imagine, just check this scenario out, hindsight. Jesus returns. He fights against anyone who goes against Israel. The very Israel that is perpetuating the very actions that Jesus supposedly, according to Christian belief, who is the God of the Old Testament.
Oh no, according to the Bible, nobody's going to come out of this looking good. As long as they are sinning against God and everything, they're going to get theirs too.
Yeah, but what I'm
I'm
saying
not
to you,
real crazy.
but what I'm saying to you, the general conception is that Israel currently, which would be the one entity where Christ will defend against those who are against Israel,
Do you
those
know
are
why?
Pardon?
Do you know why?
Yes,
It's
because
not because Israel is like the best people in the entire world and all that. God chose to put his name there. He is committed to keeping that strip of land and everything because his name's on it. In other words, anyone who sins against God is going to pay. Me, them, you, everybody, and everything. But because God chose to put his name there, he's committed to it. Does that make any sense?
Yes, but if that was the case, then they would have been in Israel. They wouldn't have been, dispersed throughout the world. They would have remained in Israel
He scattered them all right because they were going after other gods and they were breaking every rule there was, and he punished them. He punished them good.
So because I'm very passionate about this, what I want you to consider, though, you made a good point that Christ will go against those who are not good people as well, whoever they may be. But that's not what the Bible itself, in Revelation and other such biblical literature, does very, very clearly state that Christ will fight anyone who goes against Israel. Now, Israel, as Robert already made mention, are the perpetuators of the anti-God system. Now, this is not endemic in the Jewish law. It's these, like the countries we support them, where you are in the US, where we are in the UK. That's why, because they impose their values, such as LGBTQ, feminism, atheism, secularity, into the Holy Land. This is where
this system. Both know that's wrong.
Yeah, but that's what I find a bit strange. Why would Christ defend these values when he returns? Indeed, the issue we need to get to at the bottom of this hindsight, very, very important, is that, as you know, Muslims believe in his return as well. However, the Christian concept, and this is where maybe if we've got a few moments extra, Brother Muhammad, I don't want to be going over the time unnecessarily.
No, we are going over time, unfortunately. We got another 5 minutes. I have to go and do the school run, but we can continue. We can continue maybe on Thursday or Friday. We can do a part 2 to this. It will be a fantastic discussion.
But what I do want something for hindsight to reflect on whilst we wrap up the show is that you need to read Matthew chapter 7 verse 21 to 23, particularly to understand what's going on over here as well. You see, in which when Christ returns and people will say to him, Lord, Lord, we used to do many wonders and works in your name. This is very hindsight. Let's just really go through this in the 5 minutes that we have. I've just brought up on my phone. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of God who is in heaven. On that day, many people will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name? Okay. Now, it's to that. What does Christ respond to that particular point? It's very crucial that you understand from which perspective.
He said that I never knew you.
Yes, and exactly. Get away from me, you who work iniquity or lawlessness. You claim for me that I did not claim. Very important hindsight. They're making claims for him here. You can see, look, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many? So they're trying to, they will say to him, look, we uplifted you. We elevated you to God. And it's to that Christ rebukes them. It's to that Christ rebukes them. And then he makes it clear in the beginning. He said, anyone who calls me Lord, Lord, will not enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of God. Now, Lord, according to the passages in the New Testament, is defined in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 4. where Paul says there are many lords and many gods. So Lord is just but to us there's only one God and one Lord. So even that in that context, Paul is differentiating between the term Lord, which is given to Jesus, and the title of God, which is given to the Father. Lord simply meant one of a high disposition. It's based upon the Greek word kurios, like the master of the house, who is referred to as the Lord of the house in Mark's Gospel, or
Yeah.
how Abraham by Sarah refers to him as my Lord. Lord means a person of a high position, and hence I want you to deeply consider this verse in 1 Corinthians 8:4, where, and I'm repeating myself, where essentially Paul is, there are many gods and many lords, but for unto us there is one God and one Lord. So those people who have many gods, no, he's saying for us there's only one God, and there are many lords, meaning those people who have high position, high authority. But for us, only Jesus has that high authority. So here he's distinguishing between the two. But even here in this passage from Matthew chapter 7, verse 21 to 23, what we're noticing is he's rebuking those who will say to him, you know, you're calling me Lord, Lord. That's irrelevant. He said, you got to do the will of God, not that you need to do my will. So that's something for you to consider. Who are these people? These are the very people, Sister Hindsight, who are saying the following, that we did many wonders in your works, in your name, miracles. If you go to the God channel, like in the US or other parts of the world where you have satellite stations, where you see these preachers or pastors on a stage bringing people who may be, you know, blind or maybe paralyzed, and they say,
I know.
And they say, in the name of Jesus, wake up. And you see all of us, in the name of Jesus, arise from your slumber in the wheelchair, for example, and they get up. These are the people.
It's ridiculous. And see, it says judgment begins first in the house of God. In other words, the people that are claimed to be in the church and doing things, you know, in God's name, and they're really just false teachers faking it. There's all kind of ways you can fake that stuff. They're going to get it. And you're absolutely right.
But notice but the thing I want you to go away, in addition to that excellent observation, is these people who will elevate him to the status of God. These are the people he's going to rebuke, because that's why he's saying to them, not anybody who calls me Lord, Lord will enter the kingdom of heaven, but those who do the will of God Almighty. And then they will say we used to do these wonders, works, and signs in your name. Then he will say, away from me, you who claimed for me, meaning you claim that I'm God, you're claiming that for me that I did not claim.
Wow.
That's the point I want you to grab, Hindsight. I want you to grab this point and think, well, this last point I've made, and we'll wrap up because I don't want to delay Brother Muhammad any further.
Yeah, thank you.
So last 30 seconds.
Thank y'all so much for having me on.
You're welcome.
Okay, that's fine, Hindsight. I just want to rubber stamp that last point. To those who do these miracle works, thank you, Sister Hope, always. To those who always do these works in Jesus' name, who elevate him, who made him God, is these very people Christ will say, away from me, you who claimed for me, meaning you're claiming that I'm God and you're doing all these works in my name when I told you to do the will of God. You're making these claims, so you elevated me to their status, to the God status. And that is why in the Quran, where Allah says that when Allah will question Jesus, did you say to them, O son of Mary, to worship anyone other than besides Allah? And he will say, glory be to you. How can I say something which I have no right to say? I'm just paraphrasing. How can I have no right to say? Truly. So see how that verse shows to you those people in Matthew 7, 21, 23, who try to elevate him, who say, we did everything in your name. Forget about God the Father. Let's push him to the side. You're everything for us. Forget about God the Father. He doesn't even, as far as we're concerned, he doesn't even exist. So we did everything. And this is the notion where Christ will say, wake up. And that's something I hope, Hindsight, you can consider deeply. Hence, we Muslims say, worship only Allah alone.
Okay. Thank you. And
Fantastic.
I'm looking forward to a part 2 to this. Okay.
Yeah. Hindsight, leave your email address and maybe we can have a discussion between yourself and Mustafa. Hopefully that will be perfect. And because one thing I don't want is people to jump on and start giving their 20 pence or 20 pence worth or 5 cents worth to personally attack you or anything like that. So with
That's
you and
okay.
Mustafa, that would be no,
I
no, no.
like
I
to
don't.
keep my
No,
emails
sister, you are our sister, right? In humanity, we have
Yeah.
to give you the respect, the honor. So we don't want anybody disrespecting you. So it would be fantastic for you and Mustafa to have a nice discussion like this, if that will be
I'll contact
possible.
you. I'll contact you. I will see. I kind of like to keep my email private, though,
Okay, respect. Okay,
and everything.
no
If
worries.
it's all right.
What we can do, we can perhaps organise a time at hindsight's suitability, or perhaps we can discuss amongst ourselves, and then she can simply come on as she usually comes on. So we can just agree to that, or you can just perhaps leave a message in the chat when you're able to do so. We don't want to put any pressure on you that you have to come and do
Okay.
this, but I think it's
Because
very,
I
very
do have
important.
more questions. So we'll just handle that when y'all are ready to do that.
Yeah, sure. So it seems like this time's a good time for you, Sister Hindsight. So I'm thinking maybe this Saturday.
Yeah, it is.
This Saturday around about 12, same time basically, 12 p.m. ish, we start, or 12 o'clock. And I've got hour and a half availability
Sorry,
from
Brother Muhammad,
12 o'clock.
sorry to interrupt you, but that would be just a bit too late for me because I have to go to
Brilliant.
Stratford. If we could do maybe 11:30, maybe that would be better.
That's fine. That's okay with me too.
Or even 11 o'clock, 11 or half 11. 11 would be slightly better. But
what about
that's
for
fine.
Sister Hindsight? Sister Hindsight?
I'm always free. I'm retired. So I mean,
one day I'll happen to be
Which
soon.
time zone are you in, Hindsight?
sorry.
Which time zone in the US are you in?
Oh, I'm central.
So what time is it currently there?
It is 9:13 in the morning.
Okay, so that's same as roughly EST time. So you're 5 hours. So it'll be a 6 o'clock start for you, maybe on Saturday, if you're happy to come on at that time, a bit early.
Oh,
But
that's fine. The earlier, the better.
excellent. Okay, that'd be brilliant. We can have a conversation then going forward. But please do consider those last points I've made in terms of Matthew 7, 21, 23.
Okay, I will. I've
Okay,
got,
thank
as a
you
matter
so
of fact, I got my Bible open to it right now.
Yeah,
Excellent.
absolutely. But been a fantastic show. I didn't know it's going to go to this level, and I've really thoroughly enjoyed this. MashaAllah. Thank you so much, Brother Mustafa. Thank you
Thanks
to
for
Max
having
who came, and Sister Hindsight. Thank you for joining us. MashaAllah, fantastic stream, Brother Mustafa. Appreciate it. Only reason we have to cut it short is because here it's about 2:15 now, p.m. and I've got to do the school run. So, so I've got to do that. So that's one of the reasons we have to end the show. But it's been a fascinating stream. I really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody has really grasped on the early part of this stream where Brother Mustafa was telling you regarding some of these people in the background here in the British government. Very interesting. Brother Mustafa, I'll let the final words, I'll give the final words to you so you can end the show. Jazakallah khair, brother.
Barakallahu feekum. Thank you so much, Brother Muhammad, for giving me this opportunity to discuss this very important matter, which affects each and every one of us, you see, no matter where we may be in the world. And hence, we need to hold on to those values where people have belief. Particularly, I'm assuming that we have Christians and Muslims within the chat, but even atheists are welcome to come on, because even they have certain moral structures that they need to live by. And we need to uphold those structures. We need to uphold those values. And the system in place is spiraling towards a totally godless society that we're going to be heading towards. And this is all being prophesied. We know this is alluded to in the New Testament. The Islamic narratives in the Hadiths, Islamic eschatology, give you a substantial indication as to what those end time scenarios will be. I would encourage Christians to investigate Islamic eschatology in return, in regards to Jesus being his return. And obviously these shows will give you an indicator, a little taster as to why the system in place is so much spiraling towards this. And this show indicates there are those who represent God, and there are those who represent Satan. So those who represent God will always be on the straight path. Those who forego the hereafter for this life, they are indeed the ones who will be perishing in the hereafter. But in the meantime, they're going to create their anarchy in absolute adulation of their fallen angel, Satan, who will, the one who's the proponent of all evil. So that is why I thank you everyone for listening, and inshallah we look forward to future conversations. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yeah, so alhamdulillah, fantastic. Thank you for ending the show, Brother Mustafa. Thank you for all the brothers and sisters who took part in it. Mashallah, we had over 40 people watching it. I know it was a different time here. Normally we do our streams in the evening, late evening, but alhamdulillah, it was fantastic. We've learned so much. For some brothers and sisters are opened their fasts already. Sister has already opened her fast. May Allah accept it from you and your family. Ameen. And I think tonight we got another stream at 11 p.m. So 11 p.m. tonight, it will be the guidance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the month of Ramadan. Our beautiful teacher, Ustad Nasir Al Khair Bil Khair, will be our guest tonight. So please don't forget to hit this like and subscribe icon and share the streams. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.